Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Today's gospel reading is from Matthew 18, 1 through 5, and page 1166 in your pew Bibles. Who is the greatest? About this time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked him, who would be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? Jesus called the child over and had the child stand near him. Then he said, I promise you this, if you don't change and become like a child, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven. But if you are as humble as this child, you are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And when you welcome one of these children because of me, you welcome me.
Amen.
Amen.
You know, the statement that Jesus made doesn't seem all that shocking, does it? We love our children. Sometimes we admire them because of their openness. But it wasn't like that in the first century. Children were not respected. They were third-class citizens. They were to be seen and not heard. Children and their mothers were to be sort of behind the doors and not really talk out and say anything. And they were definitely not to have any opinions of their own. And that's the way it was in the first century. There wasn't really much respect for what a child thought or acted. And only elder men that usually were sitting at the city gate, like in Jerusalem, they were the ones that had all the power and all the influence. And people were always considering, gee, I wonder what people think of me. And yes, you can have that problem, can't you? And as you get older, particularly if you've been very successful, you can get full of yourself, can't you? Isn't that right? I have probably learned more from children, not as a teacher teaching them, but from them teaching me. And I would like to share some of the experiences I've had with children and with other people who've dealt with children. Not too many people wake up in the morning and say, oh, I'm alive. It's a new day. I'm so thrilled. I just can't wait to see what's going to happen later on. I feel so exuberated and I'm just so happy that I'm here. Most people are like, oh God, the alarm went off, have to go to work, or have to make the coffee, or have to do something. It's another day. Isn't too much joy, is there, when you feel that way? Or even if you say, yeah, it's okay, I'm lucky, I'm happy, I have a job, I have friends. But have you ever experienced real joy in your life? Many people have never experienced that feeling. And I had a student, I'm sad that Art isn't here today because he was also an art student. He was our speech teacher. His name was Miguel. When Miguel came off that yellow bus on a ramp in his wheelchair, now Miguel had severe cerebral palsy. I mean, he was really, didn't have much control of his arms or legs or anything. Obviously couldn't stand or walk. It was really kind of like locked up in his body. But Miguel knew the real meaning of joy. When he would come off that ramp and it was lowering, he would go, yeah! He was so happy. He was so absolutely happy. And the whole day, he would spend in school just smiling and appreciating how people would work with them and help him. He taught me what joy is. So often we have that, woe is me, if things were better, if I had more money, if I didn't have such crazy relatives, whatever the problem is. It's a woe is me kind of an attitude. And here is Miguel, who really has a lot of things wrong with him. Really seriously wrong with him. all locked up in that body, can't really get out of that chair, and just so full of joy, he taught me the meaning of that word. And my life has really, really changed because of him. I feel so fortunate. I had another boy when I was teaching one summer in a state-funded preschool. The school was held at the Methodist Church in San Pedro. And the students that we had were usually women on welfare who were in school trying to get out of being in welfare, going to school, getting prepared for a job, and with very little money. Plus, we also had students who had mothers that were in a battered women's shelter there in San Pedro. I was teaching kindergarten at the time, and I had a little guy by the name of Denny. And Denny, I was shocked to find out one time when we were going to play in the sprinklers, he took his shirt off so he wouldn't get his shirt all wet, and he had like an inch at least stab wounds all over his body. I thought, oh my God, what happened? What could have happened? This is horrible. And so I did ask him, Daddy, what happened? He said, well, my dad really is not a bad person, but when he drinks too much beer, he gets really, really mad. And he would get mad at me, and he'd stab me, and he'd stab my mother. And I really feel sorry for him, because now he doesn't have us in his life anymore. And we now ran away to this place where we're now staying. But I understand that that is not the real dad that I love. That's the dad that drinks too much. How many 5-year-olds do you know that really could understand something like that? I mean, that's amazing. I know so many people that have such a difficult time forgiving. Wouldn't that be difficult to forgive if somebody that was your parent or a sibling that would come and stab you and then you could forgive them? He taught me. I had a lot of forgiving to do. And boy, Danny was the one that led the way. I had a theology professor for a week when I went to a seminar in Asheville, North Carolina. And she shared a story with us about a little girl who was so disfigured they couldn't even find a foster home placement for her. Now, of course, when the mother and father just, they didn't want to have anything to do with her. I mean, she was really, really disfigured. I mean, just think the worst. And that probably is it. And of course, the social workers wanted to take her and put her in an institution. And the hospital, a lot of the hospital employees fell in love with her. And they did something that probably was illegal. They found an extra room that wasn't being used, and they would use their 15-minute breaks to go in and tend to her. So there was no cost to the state. This was in Massachusetts. There was no cost to the state of Massachusetts, taking care of this little girl, and they would donate the food and everything to take care of her. The story that I heard was when she was about 4 years of age. There was something very special about this little girl. She was truly God's conduit to healing. And people would come in the room, and she would just be so lit up when she would see them. And she'd go, I wanted to kiss. And when she kissed, you would feel this warmth coming from her mouth. And then she would touch them with her hands. And you just feel like a radiation all over your body. And the word got out, hey, this kid is a healer. Sounds like Jesus, right? That you have a sore throat, you're coughing, you're having a problem, come and see this little girl. And so, even though she was unable to get out of bed, She couldn't even be in a wheelchair. There was something with her body where the legs wouldn't bend or whatever. So she was in bed, but she would pucker her little lips up and want a kiss. And in doing so, she healed. What I learned from that story is that God uses all of us. It doesn't matter whether we're brilliant, right? Or high status, or we've done something where we get our name in the papers, that all of us are capable of following God's ways. And that little girl really showed so many people God's love and God's healing power. The sad thing is she died about 6 months later. But that doesn't mean she didn't make an impact on a lot of lives. And that to me is really the importance of the story. That even this disfigured little kid who couldn't get out of bed still was God's conduit of love and healing. We're really talking about humility today, aren't we? That was Jesus' point about who's the greatest and who's going to get to be in the kingdom of heaven. And he invited people to be like a little child. I once belonged to a church in Palos Verdes, which will remain nameless, where almost everyone in the church had a master's degree. It's only important, okay? And we had a number of people with their doctorates. And when you became a member of that church, they would bring you up and tell your name and where you worked and where you went to school and how many degrees you had. Oh, did I put an end to that when I came here? No, they didn't do it here, but I mean, no way was I going to do that. Because that really is not what defines you. It's trying to do your very best to follow God's ways. It's what is really important. And it was really funny because for the kids, we had some kind of a rock band, and all the instruments were all plug-in, right? Well, I guess what happened, it was a little too much plug-in. And all of it, and this was in the evening, and so, they're playing their instruments, and everything is all plugged in. And all of a sudden, boom, the lights go out. Everything is silent. There's absolute panic. What do we do? Oh, heavens. Well, luckily, we had a fellow in the church. He was sort of the oddball out. He was a custodian. Yeah. He knew what a circuit breaker was, okay? The PhD had no idea what to do. No. But he knew what to do. So he got his flashlight, went out there, got it back up. And I find that such a funny story, because often you have to really depend on the humble one, don't you? Yes. Yeah, to make things right. It is so important that when we come before God, we come to God with a sense of humility. It is so unfortunate when we think we're too big and bad and wonderful and that we just get full of ourselves. I felt so sorry for a seminary student that I went to school with. He lived for giving sermons, and he had this deep voice. This is God speaking. And that is all he seemed to care about, is that little old ladies would come up to him after the service and say, "Oh, that was so inspiring." That's what he lived for. And I thought, how sad. You give a message to hopefully share with other people that maybe it's something they can think about during the week, or something they can use. But just talking so that people will come up and say how inspired they were, no, not really. Sometimes we really need to look at little children. And I'm talking about little children, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds. And they think we're just, most of them think we're wonderful, right? Yeah. They think we're great. We know everything. Of course we don't, but they think so. And to be that way as an adult toward God and to say, God, I need your help. I need your wisdom. And I need